I'm Thomas Igeme. I'm CEO and co-founder at Trybe.ai, where we're really working to remake the professional learning experience using the latest in technology as well as the best of science, around what we know how people learn. And we focus on the entire professional development skill set, but DEI is really the lion's share of our work and the lens through which anything we do exists. So a bit about that. My background, I'm an engineer by training. Did that at Stanford, both for undergrad and grad school. Spent then the most of my career in the learning space at the Boston Consulting Group, LinkedIn, and now here at Trybe in terms of thinking about this. But I often like to say that for me, this is really personal, this work around DEI as well. So a little about who I am. I was born and raised in Kenya, came to the US at 18 as an immigrant. I'm also LGBTQ. The reason that me being a gay man is really important in this story is that growing up, alternatively, my identity was something that did not exist, something that was a capital offense, or something that was resulted in a lifetime imprisonment. And so when I was thinking through my professional aspirations at 18, when I first moved to this country, it was as much about survival as it was about self-actualization. And my story and the ability to eventually go to college and get diversity scholarships and have the experience I've had is because there were people out there who invested in diversity and inclusion. I would not be on this stage if they didn't. And I exist to help pave the way for more.
Thanks, Thomas. Shiran?
Hi. Can you hear me? Yeah. So I'm Shiran, and I'm the CEO and co-founder of Cassiopeia. I'm originally from Israel. I moved here 2 months ago, so pretty new. So what we are doing is to empower executives to create healthier and more inclusive work environment. We know how to analyze different data sources in order to detect teams with high risk for non-inclusive behaviors. So it can be different kind of behaviors such as unfair treatment, microaggressions, different kind of bullying, and so forth. So this is just a bit about what we are doing. Before that, I worked as a product manager. I led product teams in Israeli tech, and I'm also a lawyer by training, so I hold a bachelor and master degree in law. And a bit about what drives us to actually create Cassiopeia. So 2 years ago in Israel, we actually had some high-profile incidents about sexual harassment in the media. And it was all over the news, some high-profile cases of actors and politicians. And me and my 2 co-founders, we talked about it. We met in Tomer. Tomer is one of the co-founders' living room in Tel Aviv. And we talked about it, and we realized that each and every one of the co-founders actually experienced some kind of non-inclusive behaviors in the workplace. Not necessarily harassment, but either bullying or unfair treatment in the workplace. And we just felt it's such a major pain for companies these days, but there is no real tool or product that helps them to be more data-driven about it and to early detect non-inclusive behaviors. And this is what led us to actually combine our legal tech product expertise to create Cassiopeia.
Thank you, Shiran.
Okay.
Sure.
Hi, my name is Vidir Ragnarsson. I'm from Iceland, working for energy company Reykjavík Energy. And we have been, developing ways and looking at ways to close the gender pay gap. We have been measuring gender pay gap since 2006. Then it was around 10% in favor of men. And we had a new CEO coming to the company in 2011, a 50-year-old white male. And he said, I've been working in the power industry in Iceland for all my years. It's mainly governed and managed by men like me, and I know that culture is not something I want to have here. So he said, well, I am going to hire 50-50 of managers. I want you all to try to do that in other jobs. That's difficult in tech and trades, but and he said also, and I want us to close the gender pay gap. We didn't know exactly how to close it. had some ideas how to diminish it or make it smaller. But in the year 2016, we got into a cooperation with a startup company in Iceland, Pay Analytics, and that really helped us to bring it down, since now we have a software that tells us exactly who the employees are that are mostly underpaid the most in terms of how the pay structure is in our company, what is valuable in the people for us. So, and we have a measure for that, and we measure it every month, and we can see, well, the effects of changing the pay of this individual has on the gender pay gap. So that is quite cool, and this also gives us opportunities to work on equality in totally different perspective. By implementing this software, we closed the gender pay gap from 2% to 0 in 3 months.
Wow.
So we have been keeping it close, within 1% in the last 2 years.
All right, well, thank you for sharing. And so just a quick broad swath of how we're going to frame discussion. We'll talk about diversity and inclusion and belonging conceptually, and then take it down a level to the data and analytics. And if you want to go there earlier on, great. But I just want to provide some context. Having lived overseas myself in the former Soviet Union in the 90s, I was a foreigner, and I had a certain perspective on what was happening. It wasn't better, it wasn't worse, it was different. And there's some commonalities among these three. What is it? Oh shit, didn't know I was supposed to pay attention. They're all foreign born, am I mistaken? So they're coming in, again, correct me if I'm wrong, with their, what I would call, structure of interpretation. We all have our own structure of interpretation, those set of experiences that frame the lens by which we view the world. And it's something to be aware of in ourselves and in other people. And so it's great to hear, Aaron this morning and Dr. Pfeffer and everybody else over the past couple of days. It's yet another thing to systematize it and make it happen, make it reality at scale. So my question, coming back to you, Thomas, as we talk about diversity and making it real, what are some of the things that you advocate? Because so you service organizations, so how do you make it real?
So I think the first thing with making it real is a lot of our work goes around the work of inclusion. So I think that's the first thing in making it real. When we often think about diversity or the work of DEI, a lot of energy goes into how do we bring in people who look different. And yet, I often liken the way that we think about it like trying to plan a wedding, figuring out the guest list, and then waiting till everyone arrives to start figuring out how you're going to plan what happens when they get inside. Please don't be surprised if a lot of those guests turn away and aren't going to wait for you until you're finished, especially if maybe half the guests were allowed in and the other half weren't, and you're trying to figure out how to make space for them, which is a lot of the situation that we're doing. So in terms of making it real, I think the first thing we say is you've got to focus on all of those pieces. How are you thinking about the diversity coming in? How are you thinking about the equity in the policies that you have in order to make it fair? And how are you thinking about shifting the culture from a place of inclusion? The second thing is, how are you thinking about true impact? I think, unfortunately, the truth is there's quite a bit of fatigue in this conversation because we have been talking about it for at least the last decade. And the movement that we've made is just not enough. It's not enough for anyone. It's not enough for the people who are coming in. It's not enough for the people who are doing the work. And I think
who would agree with that? All right, there you go.
Yeah.
There you go.
There you go. And part of it is like, what actually works? So we recognize there's a problem, so what? And so the second thing I really try to anchor on is there's actually quite a bit of science, an increasing amount of science around what works and what doesn't. How do we really steep ourselves in that rather than the general conversation? And then the third piece, I think, is around how do we just start doing something now? I think a lot of people get stuck in trying to solve the major big problem. I'm going to give you like quick little note, your little company or your big company is not going to solve systemic injustice that has covered the world for the last hundreds of years in the next quarter. It's just not. that is okay. That is not where we need to start. What we need to start is, what would an improvement look like for the people who are in the room today? And how could we expand the number of people who are going to be in the room tomorrow? How do we get really practical on that stuff?
So Shiran, before I go to you about making it real, I want to focus that question around this notion of quotas. Who here has quotas, diversity quotas in their organization, hiring, promotion? So not many of you. Interesting. What's your position, Shiran, on quotas? Because when you talk about making it real, many organizations, well, we need to hire more, women in this job family. Therefore, we have a number to it, and that forces the conversation. And as they do that, they're quote unquote successful, when in fact they might not, and there might be some detrimental outcomes of that. So can you speak to that?
Yeah, sure. So I will relate to what Thomas just mentioned, and I hear it a lot from our customers as well, that companies these days invest a lot of time and effort in attracting diverse talent, but then once they're there, if you look on the numbers, the turnover rates are extremely high. And this is why I think quotas is like really a small part of the story. And we need to shift more on creating this more inclusive work environment to retain this talent, not just attracting it. And this is exactly what we're doing, just to help them to early detect this kind of small things that helps them just, like making them feel not belong in order to create a better work environment for them.
Thank you. Comments on that, Vidir?
Yeah, well, making it real and quotas, I think quotas is a good thing in general, but it's not a big-time solution to anything. We have quotas on board members in Iceland, 50-50, and that has been helpful, but it's getting us a little bit closer. But what we do to make this real is, well, measure and collect data. And we collect data on a lot of other things than pay, on mostly, well, anything, and we always try to show the results for each gender. Race is not a big issue in Iceland. We are all like this. So therefore we are not measuring it. But when you collect data and measure, you reveal the reality of how it is. And that gives you just an answer. If you assume things are some way, you won't act on it. But if you measure, you can act on it. And that often reveals totally different experiences and stories for male and women.
So just staying with you, Vidir, I want to just play that back. So quota, and that term can be used many different ways, but what I hear you say, boards, for example, there is a commitment that's been publicly made, therefore it's almost it is non-negotiable. That's the social norm, that's the case, so that would be good. Now, you are, as a country, are regarded, famously for having gender equity, and how that's defined. Where did that commitment come from? Like, culturally, where did it emerge? Was it a woman standing up and saying, this is what we want? Was it embedded in the culture beforehand, and now it's just codified in normal business practices? Where did it come from? And it's a leading question for us here in the States, because we talk about the power of the leader and their stance and say, this is how it's going to be. And I do not know if leaders, frankly, have been courageous enough to say, this is how it's going to be. So I don't want to lead into your answer, but I just did, sorry. But what's going on there? Why does it exist that way?
Well, it really started, 1975. That's one of the benchmark that is used in Iceland. And that was all women in Iceland basically stopped their work for one day and went out protesting and demanding the same pay for the same job. So, and that was a big movement. It also had the effect that And this is, I think it's rooted in our culture. These are mostly historically seafarers. So the women were at home controlling the family. So we have this idea of a powerful woman there, not serving but managing the home. So I think it's in a way culturally has its cultural origin. In terms of equality, and in Iceland we have some advanced, but we have our problems. We are not seeing girls going into trades. That's a big issue for our company. We are missing out on half of the workforce there. So that is a problem.
Yeah. Let me take that and ask this question of you, Shiran, and we'll come back to you, Thomas. There's a large organization that was actually here, and I talked to their head of people analytics a while back, and he was like, Al, our diversity metrics look really good. Like, they're trending positively. We're more diverse hires. However, when we actually looked at the data, those people of color, for example, they were actually clustered way down into the organization. So the organization wasn't more diverse. These subgroups were actually they looked similar, but from a data perspective, the organization looked good, but it wasn't really diverse and inclusive. So Shiran, my question to you, and in turn, Thomas, what does success look like? If we're doing D&I well, how do we know we're now doing it well?
Yeah. Wow, it's a really good question.
Damn it.
So I think there's no right or wrong answer. And we are working with our customers, and usually we started with a conversation about what the goals they want to have and what they would like to measure, and what's the timeline they want to have when working with us. And I think for each organization, it's different. Each organization got their own challenges. So I think there is no one answer for it. I would say that for sure, in order to get the full picture and the deep insights on your company culture, you need to use different data sources. You need to slice it in the right way in order to really get the deep insights of the actual culture. Can definitely relate to that.
Got it. Thomas, what do you think?
I'll answer the cost honestly. What I feel is, what does success look like? It looks like everyone in this organization feels like they have a fair shot to achieve their full potential, that they can show up and be recognized for their work, advance in their career, get and give the support that they need in the same way. So many of these other things that we're putting around there, quotas, how fast people are going in this, they're just proxies because we are so far behind that truth. And actually, that's a lot of where we like to start anywhere at Trybe, with that goal, because that is really shared. Anytime I hear a lot of fear around moving towards inclusion or investing in DEI, my first thought is, you've never truly been part of an inclusive organization. Because when an organization is truly inclusive, everybody wins. Because it's not about how many women are here, or how many Black people are doing this, or how many lesbian women are doing that. It's, does everyone have a fair shot? And what you find is that rising boat lifts all tides. And quite frankly, what's sad is this is actually being scientifically studied, right? So if you look at organizations that are truly diverse across the board, up and down, it's been studied particularly over the last 15 years. They continually outperform. The top quintile continually outperforms everyone below by 3 to 5x every year. So not only does it feel better, but you're going to win.
Yep. Yeah, as you're saying that, and I'm asking this on behalf of all you. By the way, if you have questions, interject, raise your hand, because I want to make sure you have the opportunity to ask questions of this panel. Is success in diversity and inclusion meaning that we have a non-exclusive organization? And let me explain what that might mean in my small thinking. Victor, you mentioned that, okay, we don't have enough young women going into engineering and technical degrees. Where are we socially and in our organizations in accepting the reality that exists? And if we're forcing a metric, if there's just not the pipeline of talent to be in this role, and we're trying to drive a metric that, is that rational? And if those people who are of a protected class, let's say, if they want to be in there, that they are not shunned from that opportunity. So how does that get measured? I do not know if I'm explaining myself clearly enough, but I'm just trying to recognize the realities in talent markets relative to the objectives inside organizations to achieve, better diversity and inclusion in their organizations. So Thomas, what are your initial thoughts on that?
Yeah, what are my initial thoughts? I mean, one, I think that is it is a tough question. So first, I just completely want to hear that. And there are so many of these conleading factors. If I'm understanding you correctly, it's like, what's our pipeline? Where are we? Kind of what is available? I think when we think about it kind of at that meta level, like systemically, what is it going to look like for our world to be more diverse and inclusive? Those things are really important. But I kind of liken it to somebody refusing to work out because you cannot quantify how fit they are. I will never be able to quantify how fit you are, Al. I don't know what you ate. I don't know how much you exercise. How much did that running versus my taking a swim matter? Yeah. We could debate that forever. What I can tell you with absolute certainty is all of us could get 1% more fit tomorrow than we are today. Right. And it probably looks a bit like just exercising a little bit more, eating a little bit more broccoli, getting a bit more sleep. And I love to start there with your organization. We could debate forever about where we need to go, but couldn't you be doing just one more thing to make this place a little more welcoming for the people in here? What is the equivalent of your broccoli? You're getting 1 more hour of sleep. Let's start there, because almost the debate about how far we need to go, that could end endlessly, but we all need to move forward.
Yeah, I love it. Shiran?
Yeah, I agree. There's many great solutions and many products that organizations are using, and you can see the metrics. They're really improving. So I think there is a lot companies these days they can do about it. And I would say that we are focusing more on, after the hiring stage, when, you already hired this young woman, and after she became a mom, how to allow her to feel belong in the company, and she can actually be promoted and develop inside the company. This is like our side of what we are doing at Cassiopeia. I think there is many things that companies can try and do and test, and there's a long way still.
So what I heard you in that is you're looking at life stages as a diversity metric and with the desires of individuals potentially. Because, Victor, going to you, you mentioned you have a very homogenous society and workplace. That said, this is still a priority for you all. You want to identify meaningful distinctions and respond appropriately. Is that what I'm understanding?
Yeah, Max, absolutely. So what we have been doing in terms of, what I've been mentioning, getting girls into tech and engineering and trades, is we have been extending the conversation outside of the company into the schools. And we are running a program with a local school that we invite girls and boys. We have an equal number of places for girls and boys. And we invite them for a whole year into the company every other week to test and see what we are doing. And out of that program, I think 2 or 3 girls have gone into trades. We're running this for 2 or 3 years. So, and it's a conversation these kids have never had. These girls, it was out of their sphere of thinking going into this. So I think we have to ask companies to be vigilant in addressing these issues and these problems that we are going to face in terms of talent stream with the schools and with the local community.
Yeah. Absolutely. Who here has an organization that's partnering with educational institutions or economic development boards locally? Good. I hope that increases in the years ahead because we're, as organizations, starving for talent, yet we expect them to just appear as opposed to actually go partner with those institutions that are helping these people get where they, or young people get where they want to go. So as we start to land the plane, I want to talk about some data. And again, if you have questions, let me know. So Tomas Chmar-Premuzic, the head of talent science at Manpower, and he also is lecturer at London School of Business as well as Columbia. I got that out. Apologize. He wrote a great book, Why Do So Many Men, Incompetent Men Become Leaders? Fantastic book. I recommend it highly, and I also recommend you watch his talk. He and I did a podcast together, and he spoke in Philadelphia. The reason I'm bringing him up, in the book, he says, our challenge isn't to hire more women in leadership roles just for the sake of checking a box. It's to actually define leadership more clearly and appropriately. And if we so do, more women will naturally go to that leadership role. And breaking it down, number one, what do you think about that notion? Because when we talk about leadership, it was highlighted this morning around listening, empathy, creativity, holding safe places, which, and again, I'm not biasing, saying inherently women are more predisposed to those attributes, but what I am saying is exactly that. They are. There's research that shows that. So do we accept that, acknowledge that, and are we actually putting our behaviors actually supporting not only the reality in the world, but also what we desire as organizations? Because I see constantly these men getting elevated because they have the right relationships, the right place, right time, old boys network type thing. So, if we better defined, these roles, do you think not only women specifically, but people of diverse groups would go to these roles? Thomas?
So, yes. That's my first simple answer. But I think one of the difficult things in the world of leadership, and actually something that Trybe does on the side in our more R&D arm, is how do you get truly data-driven about what that leadership is? Because a lot of these things end up being very circumstantial, and today just observed. And so we might change the words on a page, but really, how do we measure the influence that somebody has and where they're able to do in the organization? And we don't have time to get into it, but there's some really fascinating research coming out on how you think about measuring those things. And I think that absolutely will help. I think, though, kind of pulling back, I have so much empathy because that question of what will actually work, I think, is the biggest gap for us today. I think that, at least for me in my world, I don't spend too much time trying to convince people that D&I is something that they should invest in. But a lot of people are burned. And a lot of people are frustrated. A lot of people have put in millions and millions of dollars and not seen things move. And actually, in some cases, even seen things get worse. And so for us at Trybe, that actually is probably the biggest question that we want to kind of contribute to answering in 2020. And actually doing a research partnership with Wharton. One of the challenges is how are you able to do that? We're hoping to kind of run a drug-like trial between looking at what interventions versus others are actually driving the impact that we're looking at. And in order to do that, we need the kind of scale that no one organization can provide. And actually, so one of the things, and I'm totally stealing here, we're hoping to identify at PAFOW a couple of organizations interested in joining with us and actually entering a much more scientific study of when we figure out inclusive behavior that we're looking for, what can we do?
Got it. Love it. And Shiran, I'm going to hone the question a little bit that I just tossed over to Thomas. If we get better at identifying the behavioral attributes that we want in a role, do you believe that will help improve diversity over time?
I think what I would like to say in that sense is that we can do a lot with data in order to actually close that gap that you just mentioned. Mm-hmm. And I think what's more interesting, and I can share a few examples from our work, that there is a lot of things that, people feel frustrated why, for example, why there is less women promoted inside the company, but they don't know really why it's happening or what's affect, this kind of situation. And there is many things you can see by just using the right data. So for example, I can share that one of our customers, so you can see that by analyzing communication metadata, who's connected to who inside the company. And in many cases, underrepresented groups tend to create more relationships with people with their own level and less with senior level, and it really affects their ability to be promoted inside the company. Right. So by using this data and increase awareness that, in this team, the women or some, other underrepresented groups not creating enough relationships with the senior management compared to their colleagues, it's something that really can make a difference and drive a change inside this team. Right. So this is one example, and I can share one example that I experienced myself as an employee in the R&D department, but also I came across it in a few other companies. Think about it. I don't know if you, like the woman in the room, if you had to be in a room full of men or engineers, and there's a meeting and someone asked to, we should take notes. And immediately they asked the woman in the room to take notes. And it happens quite a lot. And it's not something, no one wants, any bad thing to happen, but it just makes you feel really not belong in that moment. So it's also the small stuff that make people feel like not equal or not belong in that room that we can use data to just detect it on time in order to just closing that gap.
Right. Gosh, that's just the side of getting your wife an ironing board for Christmas. I mean, that's not good. So thank you, Victor. On this comment, how is this going to improve?
Well, I think it will be helpful to define the behavior, but you also have to be quite clear on breaking up the stereotypes and the biases that we all have, and we all come with the gender and race divided world we live in. So we have to be extra conscious of how to put that forward in terms of new behaviors and new ways to go.
Got it.
Well, I know that we're coming on time, but I'd love to just underscore something I heard from both of them.
Let's do it. I was just going to ask you for closing comments. So
kind of final thing. I just want to say, because I think there are very many different contexts around the world, and the more I learn about Iceland, I really do believe they have a pipeline problem. I just want to maybe be more specific. Anyone in America who talks about a pipeline problem around your roles, I just think it's true but useless when we're talking about the DEI conversation. It is true that there may be fewer women who are applying for this role, but there are more women who are applying and not getting attention than there are women out there who are not. So for sure we have a pipeline problem, but I promise you we're nowhere close to hitting that pipeline issue. If you just focus on creating more space, there are millions of incredibly well-educated, well-prepared, amazingly able to do these jobs who are literally knocking at the door. And so a lot of times, just to put a spade, and this is very much an American context, I find that conversation is a red herring to try and distract us. There are things, if you are not seeing equality in terms of the roles in your organization, there are things that you are doing that are making it difficult for the people who want to be there to either get in or stay. And it's time for us to take more responsibility around that fact.
I absolutely love it. In fact, I got a chill when you said that, because what I'm hearing, and from a very practical sense, is we need to market these opportunities better to these formerly potentially underrepresented communities, yeah? Thank you. Shiran, closing comments? Ideas?
Well, I have often been asked, you reached the gender pay gap, you closed it, isn't the work done? Nope. It's just starting now. And it's starting with, you can focus now on keeping it, and then you have to, fight the biases that creep back behind you, and try to fight that. So.
All right. Thank you. Shiran, closing comments?
Yeah. I think, and we mentioned it before, that according to recent research, the gap is not closing fast enough. And I think in this room and in this conference, people analytics is a major force that we can use in order to actually close that gap. And I think, people like the people in this room got a real power to drive change. So yeah, let's make better workplaces.
Thomas?
Yes.
Bring us home.
Yes. Maybe the last will be an invitation. So hopefully some of you see a bunch of these on your desk. We mentioned that we're doing this huge study with Wharton, trying to figure out how we can recruit more people to really understand what kind of inclusion training interventions are also going to drive value. There are two ways people in this room could help us. One, you could help us actually get a sense of how good that training is. Take it yourself. It's just 80 minutes. I talk about how we're doing things really differently. You can sign up at tribe.ai/PAFOW20 and just take it. Invest in yourself. We hope it's a gift. What we've heard from everyone is that at least they take it, they get a ton for themselves at the very least. But secondly, if you or your organization think you're interested in learning more, you're also able to sign up for more information there. We would love to kind of get you on board and hopefully figure out what really scientifically is going to drive change in this space.
All right. Well, thank you all. Super, super appreciate you being here. Cheers. All right.